Good day, everyone. My name is Samuel Tete, and this afternoon we are presenting why even educated find it difficult to think critically and the pathway to overcome the barriers. Critical thinking is an essential skill involving analysis, evaluation, reflection, and better decision making. Despite its importance, many educated people struggle with it due to cognitive bias, reliance on quick judgment, educational system that emphasize memorization, and social pressures to conform. Through critical thinking requires intellectual humility, self awareness, and ability to question assumptions.
Thank you, Samuel, for this insightful introduction. I am Gloria Ekudia Brady. Building on what has already been discussed, I will now present the case of critical thinking. In the case of critical thinking, John Dewey argues that critical thinking helps people make reflective and informed decisions rather than acting on impulse. According to him, development occurs when people carefully examine problems and evidence before acting. Robert Ince viewed critical thinking as a reasonable and reflective thinking focused on deciding what to believe or do. Scholars therefore see it as essential because good decisions lead to personal and social progress. Richard Paul and Linda Elder, they argue that critical thinking improves the quality of thinking since development depends on solving problems effectively. Societies need citizens who can think critically rather than simply memorizing information.
And by name Adi Abakar Siddiq. In addition to what Gloria has said, according to Daniel Kahneman, research shows that humans are prone to biases and errors in judgment. Critical thinking helps people overcome these biases and make better choices, which support economic and social development. Policymakers support critical thinking because modern societies need citizens who can evaluate information critically, resist misinformation, solve complex social and economic problems, innovate and adapt to change, participate responsibly in democracy. To finalize that, most of the scholars and policymakers insist that critical thinking is essential to development because it improves decision making, encourages innovation, reduces errors in judgment, and equips individuals to address complex challenges. Without critical thinking, meaningful and sustainable development becomes difficult to achieve.
I'm in a person of Apia Linda. I'm here to talk about cognitive barriers to critical thinking. Kahneman's book is organized around the metaphor of System 1 and System 2, adopted from Stanovich and West 2000. As the title of the book suggests, System 1 corresponds to thinking fast and System 2 to thinking slow. He described two ways of thinking, which is the System 1 and the System 2. System 1. Kahneman described this system in many evocative ways. Thinking is fast, automative, intuitive, unconscious, emotional, and effortless. This helps us to make quick decisions, but it can sometimes lead to mistake because we do not carefully analyze the situation well. Now let's get to System 2. System 2, Kahneman does not suggest that people are incapable of System 2 thoughts and always follow their intuition. This is thinking is slow, deliberate, effort, statistical, suspicious, controlled, analytical, and requires effort. This type of thinking helps us evaluate information carefully, solve problems, and make better decisions. Most of the people rely on the system one because it's easier and requires less mental effort. However, critical thinking requires us to use system two more often so that we can avoid errors, question assumptions, and make well-reasoned judgments. In conclusion, one major barrier to critical thinking is our tendency to depend on quick and automated thinking instead of careful and analytical reasoning.
I'm Jeffrey Darko. In addition to the availability heuristics was developed and popularized by psychologists Timoshevsky and Daniel Kahneman. They explain that people often judge how likely something is based on and how easily examples that comes into mind, rather than basing on the actual facts and the probabilities involved. This mental shortcut is mostly called or is called availability heuristic. They also study several forms of cognitive biases, which I will talk about only two. One, confirmation bias, seeking information that supports existing beliefs. And two, anchoring biases. This kind of bias is depend on the first information received when there is a situation. Their influential paper, Judgment Under Uncertainty, Heuristics and Biases, introduced these ideas and became fundamental in behavioral science.
I'm Farida bin Seidu. I'm here to talk about the effect and importance of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people with little knowledge or skill think they know more than they actually do. Because they do not recognize their mistake, they become overconfident. In contrast, experts may underestimate their abilities because they understand how much there is to know. The effects of critical thinking: creating false confidence, reducing self correction, limiting learning and growth. In simple terms, people who know less may think they know a lot, while those who know more may doubt themselves. This can lead to poor decisions and weak critical thinking. Importance of Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is important because it shows how people should not be too confident in knowledge and abilities. It encourages us to stay curious, accept corrections, and keep learning. Understanding this effect helps improve critical thinking, reduces mistakes, and supports personal growth.
I go by the name Rafael Hinabaya Jansa, and I'm here to present on emotional and psychological obstacles. We have four emotional and psychological obstacles in critical thinking. One is the belief of a truth. That's the motivational reasoning. That is whereby humans naturally behave like lawyers rather than judges. We interpret our information to defend our existing identities and beliefs, actively ignoring evidence to the contrary. And the second one is the feeling of fact, emotional reasoning. Intense emotions like fear or pride shut down critical thinking. We use our feelings as the final verdict, bypassing evidence entirely. And the third one is the character fix. Overcoming these biases isn't about knowing more facts. It requires developing three specific psychological virtues: intellectual humanity and fair-mindedness and open-mindedness. And the fourth one, that's the last point, is the bottom line. Education does not grant immunity to bias. Without the emotion, maturity to admit we might be wrong. We highly educate people in defend flawed arguments just
Figures more than they teach the skills of questioning, analysis, and independent thought. This causes a problem because students do not develop the ability to reason for themselves. Other factors including peer pressure, cultural influence, social media bubbles, and difference to authority figures, discourage questioning and critique even further. Overall, both the education system and the social system train individuals to be compliant and to go along with the crowd rather than to reason independently.
Late with their own judgment. Finally, social pressure discourages independent thinking. Many believe critical thinking develops through dialogue. Therefore, people often fail to think critically because educational practices and cognitive biases encourage obedience and conformity rather than reflection and independent judgment. Thank you.
My name is Nawe Esther Didi. I'm here to talk about the pathway for it to improve critical thinking. Critical thinking is ability to think carefully, logical and independently when evaluate information and making decisions. It can improve through educational reform and thinking, reasoning skills, encourage inquiry-based learning, and promote problem-solving activity. For and elders, standards emphasis that critical thinking should be clear, valid, precise, and relevant and logical. Lipman Community of Inquiry highlights the importance of collaborative decisions, relevance, and dialogue in developing thinking skills. Media literacy also play a key role by helping people identify misinformation and avoid the effects of echo chambers. Together, this approach helps individuals to make informed and rational decisions.
In conclusion, the paradox is real and deeply rooted. Critical thinking is indispensable for development, yet formidable cognitive, psychological, educational, and social barriers make it difficult even for the educated. Kerman's dual process theory, Deck's mindset research, Paul and Elders' virtue framework, and Dewey's reflective thinking ideas collectively illuminate why education
often fails to deliver on its promises. It frequently strengthens System 1 habits, fixed mindsets, and credential-based compliance rather than cultivating the slow, humble, courageous reasoning that genuine critical thinking requires. Nevertheless, the situation is not intractable. By making barriers explicit, integrating evidence-based pedagogical reforms, and fostering cultural norms that reward intellectual humility and rigorous inquiries, societies can narrow the gap between the idea and the reality. This paper has sought to integrate the paradox with the very critical thinking it advocates, acknowledging complexity, drawing on diverse theoretical traditions, and proposing nuanced pathways forward. In doing so, it affirms that while critical thinking is hard, it is both necessary and cultivable. The future of development depends on our collective willingness to do the difficult work of thinking better.